Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our October 16th, 2011 Conscious Conversations. And today I have a wonderful guest, a local healer, teacher, practitioner from Asheville, who is, I guess, not a practicing chiropractor anymore, but is licensed in California as a chiropractor. But we are really blessed to have Nancy Kehr join us today. Nancy is now doing some really neat work that is what they call constellation work. And she's, in addition to that, she facilitates this transformation game, which we were talking about earlier, that sounds really neat. And also, you're a second-degree Reiki master and just a great person. Soul Listener is your website, right? Beautiful website. And welcome to Conscious Conversations.
Well, thank you, Connie.
Charlotte.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Connie, get up here. She wants to talk to you.
I've been talking so much to Connie, it's like getting all the C's mixed up.
That's right.
But I know you, Charlotte, and I've been privileged to come to your Sunday morning things, and I've seen some of the YouTube, and I'm really very excited to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
So tell us, I know you're a licensed chiropractor in California.
Uh-huh.
How long did you do that?
Oh gosh, I got my license in '98. Yeah.
And then you're not practicing that anymore?
No, I moved to North Carolina, actually at the end of May of this year. And chiropractic, while I love doing it, and I did a non-force technique, and I found that it didn't make my heart sink. And I just had the privilege of exploring many options over the years, and one of them was I came into contact with something called family constellation work in 2001, and that really just seemed to resonate with me, and also I was able to see how much it was helping other people just move forward in their lives, in their businesses, just connect with nature, and just decided that that was something that I wanted to do.
And so you got into the constellation work. What is it?
Well, it was actually founded by a man named Bert Hellinger in Germany in the mid-'80s, and really what it is we have a connection to our ancestors, and they are a resource for us, as is nature and everything. And what constellation work does is allow us to see a different story. I think for me, one of the biggest things over the years that I found that it did was it really helps to get rid of judgment, because we see the story behind things. And recently I saw a video that Bert Hellinger did, and he talked about how judgment cuts us off from being all of who we are, from connection to source. And so when I see things, I don't have an immediate gut reaction to it. I wonder, what's really behind the behavior, what's really behind what's going on. And so I find that I'm more calm. As a chiropractor, I would have patients come, and they had obviously something that was not working in their body, and sometimes they would say, well, my mother had that, or my whole family has that. And at the time I just would work on the body and say, okay, well, what's going on physiologically? I know the anatomy really well, I know biochemistry. And then when I became aware of Carolyn Mace's work, Louise Hay, and then eventually Constellation, I began to look at things differently. And one of them was that how is this body trying to say either what's going on for the individual? Low back issues are, where am I not being supported? So something that constellation work can help is to see if a client comes and says, I'm dealing with a health issue, I'm having chronic low back problems. We can set up something and see, is it in their immediate life? Maybe they're a single mom and they're feeling overwhelmed at having to support children, themselves, etc. Or is it something that's been passed down on the family, that somewhere there has not been support? But then we look and see where in the family system, where in the bigger community, where in nature, is there something that can support that individual? Because it's really about love, and it's about looking both from our own ancestral line and from the greater community of the universe that we can pull in resources, and that's what I love about it.
Well, how do you actually go back into your family lineage to do this?
Well, again, it depends. If I'm working family constellation, I'm working with the individual. So sometimes it's asking what traumas are in your life, what traumas happen to the family, and we can set it up there. Sometimes the person doesn't really know much about their family. And so I choose people, well, I don't actually. I invite the client to choose representatives from the larger circle and to stand in for elements. So a simple one would be choose a representative for yourself, a representative for your mother, a representative for your father. They set these people up at the center of the circle. And when you're a representative, all you do is empty. And what will happen is there'll be a soul movement. There'll be something that comes in from what we call the knowing field. And that person will move. Those people will move in relationship to one another. And we begin to see, on a soul level, what's the picture coming up? Are we looking at, we can look at multiple generations back, and we'll just start to see where was maybe somebody in a family line excluded. And so there'll be a feeling, one of the representatives, I'll ask, what's going on for you? And they'll say, I feel like there needs to be somebody here. And we'll place a representative, and it may be a child that died that nobody spoke about. Perhaps, we're going back generations, and things that we maybe freely talk about now were things that a family hid a member about. If there was mental illness, it was like that person was, if they were institutionalized and never spoken again. But the family soul remembers. And in a family, everybody's got a right to belong. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's all done out of love. So we look, where can we add people back in? What will support? And that's really what it's about.
So, and I think it's really necessary at some time. In this lifetime or another time, it has to be healed for us to be awake. That's part of our universal awakening. Yeah.
And what is happening with the current client is they may be the placeholder for the forgotten one. Mm-hmm. So what I may see is a person that's has trouble being seen in life. And they may be representing somebody that was excluded, that wasn't seen. And when we see that, and when it comes up in the constellation, and the representatives turn to that individual, that representative, and say, I see you. If anybody ever saw Avatar, one of the greatest lines is, I see you. And that just, you can feel it in the room. You can feel the whole atmosphere just go, ah. And then all of a sudden, there's just this flow that can happen. And while this person may have immediate results, it may just keep opening, and you see them a year or two later, and they're a whole different person. One of the greatest things is the very first constellation I ever saw. It was by a German facilitator here in the States, and she said that she'd been estranged from her mother for several years and had done a constellation around it. And she said, out of the blue, like 3 days later, my mom just called to say, how are you? She said she never did that. Sometimes it happens even before the constellation is set. And so our souls, the greater, it wants to flow. It wants to have everything be ease. So we just look and see, where's the tension?
And you're working on an energetic level.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And one of the things too is that I love doing business constellations because businesses have a soul. And it used to be, it's like you go into a bank building and you'd see the founding people up there and we think, ah, yeah, whatever, you know, old people in photographs, whatever. Well, in constellation work, we see how it is important to remember who went before, whether it's our ancestors, whether it's the founding person or people in a company, whether it's the first location for your business. I mean, again, on a deep level, we do this automatically. And now, through constellation work, some of it's brought more up into our consciousness. So we go, you know, thank you for being the first one there. Thank you for being the first one to have the job that now I have.
I guess that could also be if there was maybe a corrupt founder that you could heal that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes what we see is that, you know, again, going maybe to a personal constellation is somebody doesn't thrive in business. And sometimes if in the family line, the family made money through mining, railroads, things that oftentimes came at a great deal of human sacrifice, that somebody in the future generations is trying to atone. And that can come up. And again, it's a healing thing to say, you know, at that time, that was appropriate. Again, we're dealing with multiple ethnicities, times. What I've passed judgment on, and I hate that word again, but what I think is what I would do or not do as a woman living in now the 21st century is not the way people lived 100, 200, 500 years ago. And so the idea is that, you know, bless me if I do it differently. Bless me that if I go forward in life, that was yours, this was mine.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's obviously powerful work, and sounds like you've had a lot. What would a session, would a person get their healing in one session, or would it take a number of sessions?
Yeah, the soul works in its own time, and we're inviting and opening. And also, the thing is with a family constellation, it's with the permission of the ancestors and the family soul. And sometimes it will allow so much to be seen and worked on for a while. And the person may come back 6 months or a year later, and there'll be a new piece that they're feeling that they need to work on. But it's not something that you come back week after week after week, because it's deep work. And it's what we can allow too, is if it's sometimes seeing a new picture is so radical from what we saw that it's really hard to process that. It's a little too much. Mm-hmm. If the father that deserted the family, and that's the story the person has, and now we see something different. Perhaps on a soul level, that man was protecting his family. If somewhere along the line, perhaps an ancestor was a member of the resistance in Europe. And if that person was found out, the way they saved the family was to leave. And so that got passed forward. And so when we begin to see that this leaving was out of love, it's a different story. And
well, is that work, you know, in the science of it, that there is no past or future? I mean, mm-hmm. Everything is happening here now, so we can sort of tap into all of that, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. So when you're looking at a constellation, is part of, I tell people, is that what you may see actual fact if you knew this happened in your family or is happening in your business, but because we go multidimensionally, anything can happen. And what I love is that now they've come up with epigenetics, with quantum physics, with everything that tells us we're all interconnected, that there is really no past, present, or future. It's happening simultaneously. That science is catching up with what we've known on a soul level forever. And so I find that just So
I love
cool.
it. I love it too. Absolutely. Well, changing the subject a little bit, something that I was talking to you about earlier was the transformation game, and you facilitate those groups, games, whatever. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, actually, that was something that I came across. I had gone to a retreat in Scotland, and I played this wonderful game called the Transformation Game, and I thought, oh wow, yeah, I wanted to know more about it and play a little bit longer game. So I love the internet. As I went, and there was a website, and I found out that the two women that had actually come up with the game, gosh, I think in the 70s, now lived in Asheville. Yeah, I know, go figure. And so I contacted Joy Drake, and I played a solo game in California with her over a 6-week period. And then I thought, oh, I think I want to be trained in it. So I came to Asheville, and I did get trained in the game. It's a board game. You can, again, buy it over the internet. And so you can play it like Monopoly. Or if it's facilitated, is that, again, you come up with what is it you're wanting to look at. And there are levels. There's the physical, the spiritual, mental, emotional level game cards. And throughout the game, you have insight cards, you have setback cards, you have interactions with other players, and all of them give us insight to ourselves, how we maybe interact with other people. A great one I love is there is, one of the squares is a miracle square. And it's like when you're the facilitator, sometimes it gets boring. It's like, okay, here are your choices. You know, out of all these, what would be a miracle for you? And it's very interesting is for some people, out of 10 choices, they'll choose one. And it's like, all right, does that mean that for them one thing is enough? Or does it mean that for them they can only think that they're worthy of one tiny little thing out of a miracle? I mean, think about it. Miracle, I want everything. I want the Mercedes, I want all this stuff. It's just an interesting thing. And again, it's not about judgment, it's about throughout the game being able to see how much we can take in, where can we let go. It really does, it does a lot for people. And sometimes you can play 4 days of game, the same game, never get off the physical level. You know, some people, 4 moves and they're up through the, you know, all the levels, they've had a miracle, they've gone on, and their game is over with. So yeah, it's interesting. And another part of it is there what's called, there's a service square. And again, in it, you get a chance to say, all right, you can serve yourself, or you can just serve somebody else. And it's a whole thing of, can we put ourselves first? Can we serve ourselves? The other part of it is that there are things called awareness tokens. And if you land on a service square and you want to get a service token because it's part of how you get to another level, and you don't have any awarenesses, you can't serve. And again, being in the healing arts for years and having many friends in it and seeing it is that oftentimes people try to serve when they really have no resources of their own. They're depleted physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so this game points out, it says, you cannot serve if you don't have the resources of awareness. Going back to the Constellation is, I was at an international intensive in Germany in May, and one of the things we did was we broke into little groups, and you chose a representative for your body, one for your mind, and one for your spirit, and saw how they interacted. And it was around healers of anything being burnt out. And so you saw what element needed to be supported. Sometimes they all grouped together and they were happy. Sometimes the physical body just kind of went off and the representative was just like this. And so what would support you? Well, I need more exercise. I need to eat better. Sometimes body and mind are great. They're happy campers, and the spiritual self is off there. So it allows someone to say, you know, maybe I'm not taking care of myself in all of these areas so I can continue to function, to serve.
Sounds wonderful. Well, we're really grateful you're here today. And how can people tap into your website? Give us the website address.
Well, the website is, of course, www.soul, SOUL-listener.com.
Okay.
And you know, my last name is actually pronounced Kehr.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Dr. Kehr, I love that part. But it's spelled K-E-H-R. So even my patients called me Nancy.
Okay.
It's like,
okay,
now
Nancy.
that's it.
That's great. Good deal. Well, does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask Nancy?
Yes, Connie.
Yes, Charlotte.
When you set up a constellation, other than characters like mother, father, sister, brother, do the people who are working in the constellation have any scripts, or how do they know how to move?
No, it's amazing, is it? Because I have stood in as, I say, mothers, fathers, brothers, inanimate objects, buildings, websites. It can be anything. And when you stand in as a representative, you're always aware you're you, but you can feel in your body that you're wanting to move. You may notice something on a wall that you have been in that room 1,000 times, and all of a sudden you see it, and it will take on a meaning to you. I've been placed next to somebody who is me, Nancy, is my best friend, and whoever they're representing and whoever I'm representing, I cannot stand them. Conversely, I've been placed next to people that is Nancy not terribly fond of. I love them more than anything on the face of the planet, depending on our interaction. I was privileged a couple of years ago to be in Banff at a Constellation workshop facilitated by my teacher, Francesca Mason-Boring, a wonderful Native American woman, and she's American. But in this circle were a number of First Nation elders. And it was amazing. It was a large group, and as in a lot of things, as you know, Charlotte, mostly women tend to attend, but there were a number of men there. And the healing that took place around First Nation issues, myself, Francesca and her husband were the only Americans there. It was just phenomenal. But I can remember I was placed as somebody's wife, and this is somebody I didn't even know. I loved this man more than anything, and it was just amazing to feel that come through me around what was happening in that constellation. I love nature constellations, and have felt when I've stood in for an element of nature, that power, that serenity come through me by whatever I was representing.
Well, what website can people go to learn more about that?
Actually, they can go to my website, and it will reference Bert Hellinger, and you can just Google Constellation or Family Constellation, and websites will come up all over the place.
And does Bert have a website? Or?
Yeah, it is Bert Hellinger. It's a fairly long website because it's German, so there's a lot of letters and things in there, but Constellation, we're at Bert Hellinger, and you're off and running.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Well, anyone else before we close today? Well, Nancy, it's been wonderful. It's great work. We're really looking forward to the seminar this afternoon. And thank you again.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Namaste.